Shalom Aleichem, welcome and good evening, everybody. Please stay tuned. We'll be starting momentarily. Shalom Aleichem and welcome, everybody. We'll be starting momentarily. Stay tuned. Shalom Aleichem and welcome, everybody. I love the people that come on time. We're going to wait just a few minutes, give a chance for a few more people to join, and then we'll be having our first panelist starting momentarily. Stay with us. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We're going to start in exactly 3 minutes. Stay with us. Good evening and welcome everybody. We'll be starting in exactly 2 minutes. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being on time. We'll be starting 8:05. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for coming and being here on time. We'll be starting in exactly 1 minute. Okay. Shalom Aleichem. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Business Halacha Symposium, brought to you by CHYE in partnership with so many of the shoals of the community. I'm happy you could all be here. This has been working on this event for quite some time. We've managed to put together a panel of very esteemed Rabbanim, talk about some very important topics in business halacha, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy. So let me just quickly tell you how the format of tonight's event is going to go. We have 3 Rabbanim. Each one is going to talk about a topic for 20-25 minutes. They'll take 1 or 2 short questions about that topic right away. And then at the end of the 3 presentations, we will do an open Q&A. So tonight we have, again, 3 topics that we're going to be talking about. One is business partnerships in halacha, how to make them, how, if necessary, to dissolve them. Then we're going to talk about heter iska, which is a really important topic to talk about, the right way to make one. Then finally, we're going to talk about e-commerce and Shabbos. Those will be the 3 topics, and I'll be introducing each Rav respectively. Before we get started with the actual presentation from our first Rav, just want to take a second. CHYE is here in the community, Baruch Hashem, for 10 years now. Our goal to be a resource for everybody in the community when it comes to the inyanim of Parnasa. Baruch Hashem, we have a free business mentor program, we have a free job placement division, and we now have free career counseling. All of these things are here to be here for you in the community. And so if you have somebody that's looking for a job, or if you're looking to hire any of those other things, please reach out to me, and love to hear from you and love to be there for you. Just a quick vart to start off the evening. Somebody shared with me, although not directly related to the topic of tonight's halacha discussion, but somebody shared a beautiful mina of the Rebbe to me, to a business owner, a new business owner that was starting a new business. And there's really a treasure of responsa from the Rebbe, letters from the Rebbe, in the Igreis, where the Rebbe, people starting businesses reached out to the Rebbe all the time for his bracha, for his hadracha. So here is a beautiful letter, which I'll just read a few lines of. So somebody wrote to the Rebbe that they're starting a new business. The Rebbe said, Yishtadel shamachira harishona b'chanusay yia be'inyan shel mitzvah. The Rebbe said you should try to make it that the very first sale that you make in the store should be a associated with a mitzvah. So much like when we go into a new house, a Chanukah Sabayis, we like that the first thing you do is you bring some children in, you bring some Torah, and you do some sukkim to start your house off with kedusha. So the Rebbe is advising over here as a segula for success in the business. The first transaction you do should be a mitzvah transaction. And that's a great way to start a mitzvah. And I thought that was a beautiful letter of the Rebbe. For those of you in attendance right now that are starting a new business, keep that in mind, share it around. If anyone wants to see it in print, I'm happy, email me, and I'm happy to share it with you. So we're going to get started. I just want to, put out some ground rules. So some of you that are familiar with doing Zoom, this is not Zoom meetings that we're on right now. Zoom meetings is where everybody sees each other. This is called Zoom webinar. So you only see the presenter. And if you want to communicate with the presenter, you'll notice that there's something called Q&A, okay? If you have any questions that you want to ask the presenter, post them on the Q&A. I will be monitoring the Q&A. Like I said, really, the time for Q&A at the very end, we're going to do an open Q&A. But during the, if there's something very pressing you want to ask, send it. I'll look at it. If I feel that, that it's important to interrupt, I'll interject it in. At the end, I'll select one or two choice ones to bring up to the Rav to discuss. And like I said, for those of you joining just now, we have 3 Rabbanim. Each Rav is going to present independently. So we're going to have first, and I'll introduce him in a second, Rabbi Werner, who's going to talk about partnerships. Then we're going to have Rabbi Shuchat, who's going to talk about Heter Iska, and then it's going to be followed by Rabbi Ullman, who's going to talk about e-commerce and Shabbos. So we're going to get started. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first Rav. He's somebody who's well known to the community. He's recently moved here in the past year, but for many years, Rabbi Shia Werner was a Marada Asra of the Chabad community in Oak Park, Michigan, and he was a member of the Vad HaRabbanim of Greater Detroit. Now he's here in Crown Heights, and he's part of the Ha'igud organization, which gives expert guidance on matters of chinuch, shidduchim, shalom bayis, parenting, and halacha. And so we're honored to have Rabbi Werner, who's going to present now on the topic of business partnerships. And so without further ado, Rabbi Werner, please unmute yourself. Oh, there you go. And the floor is yours.
Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Good evening. And the Gemach Simet Tova. It's also an auspicious day. Today is the day of tonight. We're entering into Vav Tishrei, the yahrzeit of Ema Melech, the Rebbe's mother. So may the schus of our learning be a great schus for her, and may her great schusim she has be a melitzesha and a schus for us, for all Chassidim, all of Klal Yisrael. The topic today, what we're going to be addressing, is about partnership in halacha. So the key points that I'm going to be talking about is how the importance of approaching partnership in a way where you don't have to end up later with too many complications and disputes, where then you have dinei Torahs, court cases, headaches, and so on and so forth, loss of finances. Now, partnership is there's many wonderful milas, virtues with partnership. Many times, if you go into business, you start a business, it can entail lots of financial obligations, lots of insights, lots of work, lots of various different capabilities, abilities, and it's a great thing to have a partner. It really takes a big burden off oneself and allows them to approach and to build and to accomplish and to build a strong financial successful business. However, partnership could also times end up in a disaster. It can be very destructive, and it can be a source of problems, heartaches, and headaches if it's not approached right, if it's not approached correctly. So that's why the key over here is to have the milah of of partnerships, of shutfis, but not have the chisorin, not have the chesroinus, the losses that can come about through partnership. So I'm going to break down over here. I'm going to break it down into quite a few points. If you have a pen and paper, you can write it down. And the first thing I want to talk about over here is when you look for a partner, when you find a partner, in many ways, it's like a marriage. Just like a marriage, you go out on a shidduch, you look for a spouse, and you want the spouse to be someone that you can work together, you can live together, and someone that you can go and understands you, and you understand them. In many, many ways, a partnership in business is the same. Of course, you're not marrying the person. You don't have to be best friends, but you have to be compatible. You have to be able to go ahead and work together. It needs to be someone you trust, which I'm going to soon talk about trust. But if you don't have trust, then you're not going to be successful. You need to be ready to not always get your way. You have to be ready to be mevata. Mevata means you have to sometimes give in, even if you feel it may cost me a couple of dollars. Just like as we're talking to businessmen, to be a successful businessman, you have to be ready to lose. You cannot be afraid to lose. Part of growing a business is realizing and understanding you're going to lose at times, or especially when building up a business, you're going to have losses and you have to be ready to lose. Same thing is over here is when it comes to partnership, you have to be ready. You have to create within yourself a temperament that it doesn't have to always go your way, because if you're insisted for always to go your way, you're going to end up clashing. You're going to end up with problems, and it's going to give you more heartache than anything else. More headache. It's going to end up being a force, a destructive force, rather than being something that you can build and have something so beautiful. So when you go out when you look for a partner, you need to realize that a partner is someone that I am going to be working together with. I'm going to be trusting. You need compatibility and trust. When you talk about trust you can have on many and various different levels. You have trust. You need to be trust. You have monetary trust. I trust him with my finances. I trust him with money issues. I trust him with money, things that revolve around money. You also have to be someone you trust as far as he's honest. I don't just trust his take, his approach. I trust his response that he's a responsible person. I have to trust him that he's an honest person. If I'm not going to have the basis of honesty in my partner, in me trusting my partner that he's an honest person, you're not going to be successful building a business. You have to be able to be compatible. Compatible means you can work. If you have two people that are, for example, work by instinct and work by, just, off the cuff, anything that comes spontaneously, you just go and you're always on the fly, you'll end up again with lots of problems. You need to be compatible. You need to be able to work. It needs to work. You have to fit. Personalities have to be able to work where you can see he has his mila, I have my mila, and we work good together. In business, you have to have, you always, especially in building a business, you need a certain kind of breitkeit, a certain kind of broadness. But sometimes if you're too broad, it's also no good. So you need someone who can put the brakes on. You have to have some compatibility where you can work together, you trust each other. These are very, very important pieces to a successful partnership. In a successful partnership, you have to be able to go ahead and be workable. As we mentioned earlier, you need to be workable. You can't always be stubborn. You can't always insist to get your way. You need to realize some battles you're going to get your way, some things you're not going to get your way. Some things you may think you're right, but the other one has another opinion. You have to be able to work together. Research. Another very important, once you understand what it takes in being a partner, in partnering, you have to now go out and make sure you do research on your partner, just like by a shidduch. You do research on the one you're looking into. If it's you're researching the girl for your son, or you're researching the guy for your daughter. You need to do research. I have been involved in quite a few instances where you didn't do research. You found a guy, you were very eager to make money. You saw a great deal. It was a great opportunity. You jumped into it, but you didn't research your partner. And you paid a hefty price. They paid a hefty price. I was just not long ago involved in a situation where a guy was looking into buying a business and partnering partially in the business. And things were looking good. It was a very good opportunity. It was a good business. Things looked very good. And it was looking into it, and they were tentatively coming to an agreement, but not yet. But something at some point he realized, someone brought it to his attention that something doesn't look so good. He saw an article once. So anyway, he did some research. He reached out to someone, and a former partner, and he found out that this is a guy that he's never been successful in any partnership. To make a long story short, the guy called him back. He said, I don't think it's a good idea. And 2 weeks later, he gets a hazmana from a bezdin suing him for $6-7 million. So again, when you want to go into partnership with someone, aside the fact that you need to do the research, you need to research the person and make sure, the first thing is you need to make sure that he's an honest broker and that he's workable and that he's not a terrible action, as we spoke before. The research is extremely important and cannot be overlooked. And it's something that sometimes when you smell something really good, it's a great opportunity. You know, I was involved not long ago with another incident where there was someone who was given the option to invest a lot of money. And it was a very sweet deal, and it was from a Yidden, and it was Chiddush Yidden. And he invested a lot of money and lost everything. And had he known all the ins and outs, had he done all the researches, had he done all the accounting, had he done all the researches of whoever is involved, who else is involved in this business, and knowing the personalities, he could have saved himself lots of money. So research before you go into a partnership is extremely important. Another very important element in partnership is communication. It's particularly important to communicate and not to assume. Before you enter a partnership with someone, don't assume everything is good. But don't just assume. Communicate. Don't assume when you're in partnership that your partner is ripping you off. Don't assume, because these assumptions has brought businesses, has destroyed partnership, has destroyed businesses, and sometimes in some particular cases, it's forced the guy to buy you out, and if you had only held on to it over the next few years, you could have made millions of dollars. But because you didn't communicate, and this can be in many ways. I know a situation where someone assumed that he was making a wedding, and his partner managed to get a certain deal going, and he ended up making it at $150,000. And he called him up a week before the wedding and told him, my partner, I have $75,000 for you. It was a building management. It was a partnership. This guy was doing the management. But the guy was more of a silent investor. He gave him the $75,000, and 3 weeks later, he gets a Hazmana of the Torah suing him for lots of money in the Torah because he said, if you suddenly had $75,000, you must have been stealing from me. Especially that he had a son who was a lawyer who paid him a cup. And it ended up being that it was all in his head. The guy bought him out. And now something that was worth a few $1 million today is worth $20 million, $25 million. So sometimes assumptions assumptions can be very, very costly. Don't assume. Communicate. If you feel there's an issue, if you feel there's something with your partner, communicate with respect. Just like in a marriage, you communicate to your spouse. If something is bothering you, you communicate, and you communicate in a way where you come across respectful, you come across humble, you come across caring. The same thing is also with a partner, but you need to communicate. Clarity. The next part over here for a successful partnership is clarity. Everything needs to be extremely clear before you enter into a partnership. The clearer you're going to be before you enter, before you close the deal, the clearer you're going to be before you enter into the partnership, the better you'll be off later. Clarity before a deal will save you time. It will save you headaches. It will save you losses. The key is to be clear on every prat. What if this happens? What if that happens? How would I approach it if this way? What? Be clear in the deal. Don't leave anything unclear. The next Indian is the approach. Before you become partners, when working on a deal, you need to approach, this is a very important point. You could be two good friends, and you say, my friend is not going to mess me over. My friend is not going to steal from me. My friend is not going to do this to me. You approach it that way, you're not in a good place. You won't be in a good place. Because when you approach a deal and you're not going to be absolutely clear, and you're not going to cover all your grounds, and you're going to be ambiguous, you're not going to be clear in everything. Clarate in breaking down every part of the business and clear in what your position is and what my position is and where and what's expected from me and what's expected from you. And later we'll talk about other areas where it is extremely necessary in being clear. So in order for that, you need to approach it like both of you are two, I don't want to say enemies, but yeah, you need to approach this as if you don't trust each other. You say to each other, look, we want to make this the most trusting relationship. We want this to be a partnership that's going to be matzliach. We want to trust each other. So now let's approach it as if we don't trust each other. The Gemara says, you have svaras of migui in the Gemara. Sometimes they're very deep svaras. And a lot of these svaras, you used to wonder what a simple person in a Bezdin Tainert. How is a simple woman in a Bezdin having a fight with her husband about a ksuba? How is she going to figure out these tainas that the Chachomim, it took the great rabbis of the Talmud, the great Chachomim, Tanoim, Amoraim to figure out? And the answer is no, when it's negeah to you, abstract, you have to be a Chacham. But when you're in it and you're fighting it out and it's negeah to you, you'll figure everything out. So you need to approach it as if you're in that situation where we are not getting along. We don't like each other. We're not friends. You approach it that way. You approach a partnership that way. You'll be able to lay out and go through and figure out and how the clearest way how to lay down the premises and the points and the foundations of this partnership. You have to take another thing. You need to take into account children. As children grow up, they bring them into the business, and a lot of times partners. So you have to be clear about that in the beginning. And as I'm going to get to soon, where you find someone who you can discuss these things, because you need sometimes smart answers, how to go about it. You don't want to necessarily say you can't bring a child into the business, but it's got to be done in a way where do not say, oh, I'll deal with it later. You deal with it later, you'll be dealing with headaches later. You want to avoid the headaches. You want to be successful and have a successful business. You need to work on it and face the issues now so you can clarify and be clear about it so that later you don't have these complications and issues. And here we go to the next, to the final stage. You need to keep everything. You need to document everything. Everything must be documented in writing, extremely clear, legal. Do not leave anything unclear. Do not leave anything ambiguous. Do not leave anything vague or anything that can be interpreted later. Sometimes you say, all right, better let me not deal with it now because I'll deal with it later. That usually doesn't work out. So you need to remember, you need to document it, and you put it in writing, and you put it in writing in a legal way. And by doing so, you have a legal document binding both of you, and being in clarity in the way the business is, in the way the business is laid out, and how each one of you, what you guys attribute, and so on and so on. What's the responsibilities for each one of you, and so on.
Rabbi Werner.
Yes.
Your time is flying very fast. We only have 5 minutes to go.
Okay, so let me try to finish this quickly. Here we go into another very important thing, and that is a Mara de Asra. I would advise anyone going into partnership to find a Rav that both of you are comfortable with, who is a smart person. You don't want just a Rav who knows how to go ahead and pass a Shailin Yeredeya. You need to get a Rav who's a Chacham, who's insightful, who understands, who knows how to finagle, understands business, and can go ahead and give you guidance in every step of the way in breaking down the deal and facilitating things later things come up. Always commit yourself to a das Torah, like they say. But it needs to be so, and that obviously you both trust. You both trust Sai in his intellect, Sai in his Yediyas HaTorah, Sai in his smart. He's smart. He's street smart. He's witty. It needs to be someone who has an understanding in it. But that is a very important nekuda. And here we go to another very important nekuda, which is a bezdin. We know that later you go to, and as time goes out, I can give you stories and stories. How sometimes, because you were not clear, because you didn't have this Rav over here, you ended up later in bezdins and you wasted money, and it didn't have to come to that point. So that is something that is extremely important. That in the shtab, the documents that the business documents, you want to put in over here that you're going to go to a bezdin, but you're going to do it under the guidance of the person of this Rav that you both go to, and that you both are not going to go to courts. Number one, in Halacha, it's something that the Torah is very, very serious about Halacha. But you also want to work out over here with this person that, for example, now, which bezdin we're going to go to. It's not going to play a game. I'm going to run to this bezdin, it's going to go to this bezdin, but we're even going to the bezdin. The bezdin is the last resort. If the Rav feels that he cannot any longer give any kind of achra, and he sees it's an issue that needs to go to a bezdin, go then to a bezdin under the guidance of the Rav. You'll help and save yourself from lots of losses, wasted money, and so on and so forth. And then the last thing I want to go into is the accounting and open books. Many times you would have, let's say you have in businesses where one partner is dealing more with the money, the other one is either a silent partner or is dealing more with other areas. And sometimes, and I can go again, there's stories, so many stories in businesses where because you weren't transparent, or you didn't go and you weren't in touch with the bookkeeper on a constant basis. Constant basis can mean every 2-3 months. You know, there's a transparency over here, and there's the books are open, so that later you don't come a year later and say, you know what, you stole from me for the last 2 years. That's another very important nakuda to go ahead and place in your structure, in the business, in the documents over here, and in the documenting this partnership, the binding the partnership. So these are some points that are extremely important. If you approach it with it like this, if you approach it correctly, you'll save yourself later from a lot of issues in halacha, dinei Torahs, headaches, and so on and so forth. There's a lot to talk about this, but the time is short. So with this, I give it over to you, Rabbi Wordy.
Okay, Rabbi Werner, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. For those of you that are watching, what's going to happen is Rabbi Werner is done for now. We're going to be introducing the next Rav for 25 minutes. Rabbi Shuchat is going to speak. Afterwards, we're going to have Rabbi Ullman. And then afterwards, we're going to do open Q&A. So we're out of time to do some Q&A for this subject right now, but Rabbi Werner will be back in about 45 minutes at the end of Rabbi Ullman's presentation, and we'll do an open Q&A at that time. So Shekayach Rabbi Werner, and
Thank you.
yes, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, shut off your camera.
Yeah, yes.
We're gonna welcome the next. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to our next topic. This is a very important topic. Many of you, you know, sometimes you have opportunities. Friends have a great business opportunity, and you know, there's a chance to make money, and there's questions of ribbis. So obviously, in halacha, we have the heter iska. It's a special halachic document that you sign, which allows you to go into a business partnership without the issues of ribbis. Now, this is a very important topic, and it's not well known. I mean, there are heter iska documents available online, but we have with us a renowned Rav here in Crown Heights, Rabbi Shalom Ber Shukat, who is he sits in the Beis Din, and he's involved in many dinei Torah, and he's actually, it was just announced for those of you that were. For those of you that noticed, there's going to be a brand new kollel lahalacha starting in Crown Heights, and Rabbi Shuchat is going to be the Rosh Kollel. It's going to be a kollel that teaches practical halacha for people that are interested in getting into Rabbanus and Dayanus. And so we're excited to have Rabbi Shuchat available. Rabbi Shuchat, if you could please turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And please, if you could take over the presentation. I now unmuted you. You have to unmute your camera.
Doesn't work.
Why? Try again. There you go. Yes. Okay. Thank you. The floor is yours. You have a 25-minute presentation. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm just again, for those of you that just came on recently, there's a little thing called Q&A. If you have a pressing question you want to ask, type it. I'll be monitoring it. If there's enough time, we'll give Rabbi Shuchat 1 or 2 questions at the end of his presentation. Otherwise, we'll save all questions for the end after Rabbi Ullman. Okay, Rabbi Shuchat, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Good evening. To everyone. Today we're going to be speaking about how the proper way to make a heter iska. As was mentioned before, there are various heter iskas that are available online. However, as Lubavitchers, we have Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, that's a Machzedek Shtuvas, and certain things that we are different. In general, Lubavitch is different, but even in this, we're also different than the rest of the Welt, and therefore, this share is to explain to you how to be able to do a heter iska properly without having any halachic questions whatsoever. We'll start with the basics. What is the Isser of Ribbis? According to Torah, if you lend the money to somebody and a certain amount of money, and then you charge him a higher amount, and he has to pay you back a higher amount, which is determined based on the amount of time that you have to pay it back. Interest, that is ribis deraisa. It's considered aser, and it's a violation of Torah law. And if you go to Beis Din afterwards, the Beis Din will force you to return any money that was received above the original loan. There are also various concepts of Isurim Derabanan that the Chachamim added, which are also considered ribis. However, they're not deraisa, they're still asr. For example, if you have a certain product that you don't have in stock and you are selling it to somebody, you're selling to somebody the option to buy this specific product, you tell them, if you pay me today, before I have the product in stock, it will cost you $80. If you pay me when I have the product in stock, it will cost $100. That is considered ribis. It's also asr. Why? Because since the person does not have the product in stock, that money that he has now is not a money for a purchase. In essence, that money became a loan from you to him for $80. And when the time comes to pay back, he's giving you a product which is worth $100, which is also considered ribis. There is also, there's also additional ways of ribis that we still mentioned before. Ribis deraisa is when you decide a set amount of percentages or payments that will be given at a specific amount of time. Ribis derabanan is if you give something extra without making that decision from the onset. The halachas of ribis are very broad, and this is not really the topic of today's presentation. I just wants to give you that when it comes to lending money to somebody, there is a mitzvah to lend money to somebody else. There is no mitzvah to do heter iska. There is a mitzvah to lend money to somebody else. What is the concept of heter iska? The Chachamim saw that people are not lending money as they should be lending money. And instead, they came up with this solution, which is a partnership. And like today's whole symposium is all partnerships. Started with partnerships from Rabbi Werner, and heter iska in essence is a partnership. It's a full-fledged partnership. How does this partnership work? As we said, a person is not allowed to lend money with interest. So a person is allowed to lend money. He can get back the money. A person is allowed to give somebody a deposit, a pekadon, and that person, if it's planned in advance, that person could use that money for an investment. And whatever money comes back, whatever money he could arrange to share the profits with the person who gave him the pekadon. So heter iska, the way it works is it's a partnership. It's a partnership whereby, though we can't call him a lender anymore, the investor gives, let's say, $1,000. From those $1,000, 500 are considered a loan. Since they are considered a loan, those $500 are guaranteed. That means regardless of what happens, the person who borrowed that money, those 500, has to pay those 500 back. The other 500 are considered a pekadon, a deposit, and those 500, and the responsibility is on the person who borrowed it only to a certain degree. But in reality, if there's a loss, then the person who invested the money is the one who loses out from it. And if there's a profit, the person who got the money, who invested, also gets a profit from it. So every heter iska is made from dividing the loan, the amount, into half. Half is considered a loan. That half is always guaranteed. And the other half is considered an investment. And therefore, based on the half that is an investment, the profits are going to be shared half and half. That means the person who invested the money gets 50% of the profits, and the person who is taking the money also gets 50% of the profits. That is a iska. That is the definition of an iska, a business deal. One person invests, one person works, you decide how much each one makes, and that's not a problem. So what's a heter iska? Heter iska means that it's a partnership, but it has different terms. Instead of dividing the partnership, instead of dividing the profits and the losses half and half, you decide from the onset, being that I'm not interested in dealing with you every month to figure out how much profit you make, and you're not interested in dealing with me every month to figure out how much profit I make. Therefore, we determine from the onset that a certain amount of money will be given as a return on this investment. So let's say a person borrows $100,000, borrows $100,000, an investor gives $100,000. Those $100,000, if they'll be invested in the business that this person is doing, will generate on average of about 20% in returns. So now he could do a heter iske to receive 10% on the investment. So he will receive 10% of what he invested in addition to the original investment. Why only 10%? Because he's only half a partner. He only receives half of the profit. So if the business, the first thing to do when you determine the heter iske is whichever percentage you're thinking of making off this deal has to be half of the maximum potential income that this deal could make. If this deal could only make 20% in total investments, and you're writing on your heter iske that you're taking 25% profit, then that heter iske is by definition null and void, because there's no way that person is going to make 50% profit on that money and give you half, which is 25%. So it's not a heter iske. It's a loan, despite the fact that there's a document that's called a heter iske. So that is the first point in knowing your heter iske. Second point, the standard heter. So this is a point that in general is heter iskes that you take. They don't tell you these instructions. They just tell you write whichever percentage you want, and that's it. Second important point, where this is where the Alter Rebbe differs from the rest of the poskim, is whether you are allowed to have a never-ending heter iske and the heter iske which states monthly percentages. According to the Alter Rebbe, the concept of an iske is you invest money, $100,000. At the end of the business deal, you will make 10%, 15%, whatever it is, another $10,000 to $15,000. So when you write that's the Alter Rebbe looks at how a business deal should be structured. You're not allowed to write month by month how much percentage you're paying, nor you're allowed to write how much payment per month you could take. So even if you do decide it's going to be monthly, let's say you have to make a determination for the beginning. This investment is a 24-month investment, 2 years. The total amount that's going to be in the heter iske you're going to write the first day that we started from today until 2 years from now. This is the term of the iske. There's $100,000 invested. At the end of the iske, the investor will receive $15,000. You don't write the percentage, you write just the number, $15,000. And that's it. At the end of those 2 years, there's no more. It doesn't 15,000 per year. So it's really, you don't write per year, it's 30,000 you get. You don't write on the heter iske a percentage number, and you can't write per month or per year. According to the Alter Rebbe, if you write the words per month or per year, heter iske is again invalid. You can't write a percentage per month and per year, and you can't have a heter iske that does not have an ending date. It has to have a starting date, an ending date, and an amount, how much has to be paid as profit, and that's it. Now, being that people don't want to pay at the end of the deal the full amount, it's hard. So you could make an agreement that the two parties can make an agreement. It could be written that the two parties agree that they could divide it into 24 payments that should be given at various intervals. That is the second point. The third point is, when you make a heter iske, according to the Tzemach Tzedek, for a heter iske to work, the heter iske has to be understood by both parties. The concept of the iske, what I just explained to you now, both the investor and the person who receives the money both have to understand the technique behind this heter iske. If they sign a document which describes the terms, so you rely on the fact that probably the person who signed the document read it, and he probably understood what he was signing. But if there's no document, then it has to be clear that both parties understood what this heter iske is about. If a person spoke about making a heter iske in the beginning of the investment, and he forgot to write a shtar, but it was clearly decided from the first moment of the investment that there is going to be a heter iska. Then it's good. You're not over any prohibition of ribas. If you did not speak about that, and originally you lent money with interest, then the moment you realize that you made that mistake, you have to make a heter iska, which will be starting from that moment. Any money that was given to you up until that moment is ribas deraisa, has to be returned, or maybe ribas, if it's percentage monthly, has to be returned to the person who borrowed the money. And then you make a heter iska on whatever amount it is. There is a famous trick that you give the money back, and then the person lends you that money in addition to the original money, and then the heter iska becomes a bigger amount, so he owes you that money too. That is one of the ways to fix when you have a heter iska. In the middle, you realize that you made a mistake. Another point for heter iska by definition is a business partnership. Iska comes from the word business. The person who takes the money has to invest it in the business. It's not money that a person could use for his own personal uses. If you lend money, if you give money to somebody and you know that he's not in business, that he's in debt, and he's going to use that money to pay debts or for his personal needs, and he does not have a business where he could make that money from, that money, heter iska, also will not work for it because that money is not invested in an iska. There's one more element, important element in the heter iska. Being that the person who's taking the money is in essence working for you, because he's taking money from you and he is giving you, he's working and investing, and he's giving you a profit. So he's working for you. Therefore, you have to have in the heter iska a payment to him for his askos, for his involvement in this business deal. So usually you write a small amount of money as a symbolic payment for his for his working for you, and then the heter iska is good. A heter iska which has a guarantee on it is invalid. If a person gives a personal guarantee or a side guarantee to the full amount of the investment, that undoes the whole heter iska. Whether he guarantees just the principal or he guarantees the principal and the profits, if there's a guarantee on this heter iska, that heter iska is again invalid, because heter iska by definition is a business partnership which has losses and gains. So the question is, why would somebody want to do a heter iska? Every person will take money, will claim, hey, I lost all the money, I didn't make any money, I don't owe you not the original amount and not the profits. Therefore, the heter iska is the way the Chachamim established it, the Poskim established it, is that a person is not trusted to say that he lost the principal unless he brings two eidim. And he is not trusted to say that there was no profits unless he takes an oath in Bezdin. The two eidim that come have to testify that the money went from this person straight into the business deal, and that business deal flopped and the money was lost. If a person buys a property or buys something with that money and the property does not generate income, that doesn't mean the property was lost. It doesn't mean the money was lost. The money is there, just in the property. So the person could come and take his amount. If a person could prove that there is losses, that he lost the principal or that he didn't make any profit, ultimately, that's the point of a heter iska. The person who gave the money will not be able to recoup any part of the profits. And from the original investment, if it's half loan, half picot, he'll get half that he gave. Another important point, according to the Alter Rebbe, you're not allowed to mention the word interest, loan, borrower, lender in a heter iska. Any form of document, any word which could imply borrowing, lending, ribis, all that cannot be written in this heter iska. That's why I told you before that you have to write the total number of the profits in dollar amounts, not as percentages, because percentages seems like a heter iska. It seems like a ribis, and it's again a problem according to the Alter Rebbe. again, if you made a mistake and you wrote it anyways, then it doesn't cancel the heter iske, but you should be careful not to write it. When you have a heter iske, you should not have another document which has opposing terms to the heter iske. You cannot have a promissory note, a legal promissory note, which says one thing, and then you have heter iske, which says the opposite. Because you know, and the person knows, that if it comes to the point you're not going to come to Bezdin, you're going to run to court with a promissory note, and in court they're going to look at it as a loan with interest, and they're not going to look at it as a business deal, and therefore, you're in essence, you made money be'isser, in the interest of ribs. Now, the another two last points in this heter iske. When you write in the heter iske what money you're that let's say the investment amount is $100,000, the profit amount is $30,000, and the term is 2 years. You cannot write the amount of the principal plus the interest together, because then it looks like you're receiving interest. That's why you have to write the original investment amount. Right, $100,000 original investment amount has to be returned by this and this day, plus 30,000 profit amount has to be returned on this and this day. You can't put them both. You can't put them both together. The next and last point is an investment, by definition, does not generate profits the day you invest money. So therefore, you cannot do that the person pays upfront the money that you want to make off this deal. You tell a person, I'm lending you $100,000, I'm giving you $100,000 as an investment, and you have to give me $30,000 in profits. I'm only giving you the $100,000 in investments if you give me the $30,000 in profits upfront. That also doesn't work. You're not allowed to. That's considered full ribis, probably deraisa. So the only way this would work is if these 30,000 are already considered as a payment of the principal. So the person says, I'm paying you now. You want 30,000 now? I'll pay you in a few days. I'll pay you off the principal 30,000. There's a condition. That's a condition from the beginning that it's a payment of the principal. And it cannot be a payment for the profits. Although a heter iske is a business partnership, the same restrictions that apply when a person lends money and does not take interest apply in the heter iske, as in that the one who took the money cannot give certain enjoyment, hanoe, to extra, whether it is giving a presents or those kinds of things, to the person who gave him the money, because those extra things that he's doing, in addition to what's written in the heter iske, becomes ribis on the money that he borrowed on the half that is a loan. Now, when there is a loan, which is when the half is a loan, usually, like I mentioned before, usually heter iske is half loan, half pekadon. That way, at least half of the money is secure. Some people want to make more profit, a higher amount of profit, because if you have half and half, then you can only make half of the maximum amount of profit that could be made from this business deal. So they make it 90-10, 90% pekadon and 10% a loan. Then they could take 90% of the max potential profits that could be made from this business. So not everybody holds that works, and you run the risk that you could lose all the 90%. I actually want to finish with an interesting story. I got a call from a lawyer about doing a heter iske where he was worried that, being that in New York State there were cases in court where the court, as far as I know, did uphold a heter iske, that they should go to rabbinical court to determine, the bezdin to determine the validity of a heter iske and how much money should be paid. So he was worried that this person who's borrowing, who's taking the money, is going to take a heter iske, and is going to drag them through the litigation for years and years and never pay. So he asked me, what can he do to make sure that this person does not use the heter iske as a leeway, but actually this person is going to be making money, and he should pay, and he shouldn't be able to avoid it. So the agreement that was reached was, I gave him an idea that he should give, the heter iske should not be given to the parties. Heter Iske sat in the rabbi's drawer. The rabbi held it for the person who for the people. Therefore, in case there would be something, the only place that the people could come and claim Heter Iske was to come to the Rav. The Rav had Heter Iske, and there'll be a bezdin. They'll deal with the questions. That way, he can't go to court and claim Heter Iske and bounce back and forth. And that's a story. I just want to end with another thing. One more thing. Although we're discussing Heter Iskes, there was once a Gemach that was named after the Rebbe's father. The Gemach was in Eretz Yisrael, if I recall correctly, or it was not named. It was after the Rebbe's mother. I'm not sure. And they wrote to the Rebbe a report about the Gemach, and they wrote over there that they lend the money, they give out money with Heter Iske. And the Rebbe wrote something which has my father's name on it, or my name on it, whatever the Rebbe, I'm not sure if it was in honor of the Rebbe or the Rebbe's parents, should not be doing Heter Iskes at all. A Gemach is meant to lend money to people, not to make money off people. With this I conclude. I think that my Rabbi Oman, who thanks to him I am where I am today, has been already on the call for 20 minutes, and I would like very much to hear him. Gemach Simatei with everyone.
Okay, so first of all, Rabbi Shachat, that was a fantastic presentation. All these presentations, I'm recording them. This would be a primer. I really would tell anyone that wants to try to Heter Iske, they should listen to the shir beforehand. You spoke about so many things I never heard before. Fantastic, and thank you very much. There's some serious shilas that were posed. For those of you that posted them, if you don't mind, because of the tightness of time, we're going to ask Rabbi Ullman to present. And then after Rabbi Ullman's presentation, we'll do open Q&A. I see your questions; they're here. I see there's some pretty serious questions that you'd like to ask Rabbi Shachat. Please stay on the line. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome. We're very honored to have a very esteemed Dayan, senior shliach. He's for us it's 9 o'clock at night, but for him it's already tomorrow, Thursday, 11 a.m. And it was quite an honor that he was able to join us. And I'm going to call up Rabbi Yoram Ullman, who is the Av Beis Din of the Beis Din in Sydney, Australia, and somebody who's a well-known halachic authority. He's going to talk about very practical thing. I've been telling people that Baruch Hashem, that so many Yidden make a parnasa online. Really, in this crazy time that we're living in right now with the coronavirus that has really shaken up the whole world. People that sell online, though, that are positioned correctly, have actually, Baruch Hashem, been doing well. Of course, people can't go to stores, and the demand for purchasing online has only grown and grown. And that's just the way forward. We're going into this new world where online is becoming ubiquitous, to use a fancy word. And it's been taken for granted that you could have a website and it could be open on Shabbos. Everyone has a website that's sort of there on Shabbos, but people have their websites and they just don't they don't process the order, but then they process it after, or they're selling on Amazon and eBay, and people sort of just assume that it's totally okay. The question is, are there any shilos and things to be aware of? And so we asked Rabbi Ullman to talk about this very important topic. So without further ado, I asked Rabbi Ullman to please, if you could take over the unmute yourself and your video, and you'll give a 25-minute presentation, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A. Again, for those of you watching, there's a Q&A box. You could post your questions there, and we will get to all of the questions as they are posed. So Rabbi Ullman, the floor.
I'm trying to open my video, but it says that.
Okay, you are.
Now
Okay. Nice to meet
you very much.
And thank you.
Yoshua. I was listening to the last part of Rabbi Shachat's very, very informative talk, and I was reminded that last week I received the following shaila on WhatsApp. Someone wants to add to Heter Iske the following words, and you can, after you heard Rabbi Shachat's presentation, you'll see how mufrach, out of the question what the person is asking. But he's asking as follows, that he wants to add the following clause. Despite anything herein to the contrary, it is expressly agreed between the parties that this document cannot and will not be relied upon or put into evidence in any proceedings in any court in Australia. So you can imagine this Heter Iska document is null and void. The question which I was asked to talk about today is a very complex question because there's so many details in it. And I want to make a disclaimer from the beginning that what I'm saying now cannot be relied as a generic psak halacha because there's so many nuances and so many different protim in it. And therefore I will talk about just as much as the time will allow to discuss the main issues. You know, at any time that somebody has a particular shaila, especially shaila that we're talking about the whole hemshech of one's business, it's important to be able to speak to a rov. I certainly will be happy to discuss, at some later stage individual questions that people have. I'm talking about if questions come up in the future, but this is just bullet points to be able to see what the issues are. So I'm also received just prior to this talk from somebody a number of questions, and I'll try to address, and that's what I'll try to talk about. So basically basing my talk on the questions which I've received. So the main two subjects is the general subject of doing business online when somebody has a website, a commerce website, and can this website be open on Shabbos? Does it constitute Chilul Shabbos, or does it have to be closed on Shabbos? And again, I want to say that these questions are not always black and white. Sometimes it is praiseworthy. There's a few Gemaras in Shabbos, Gemara Shabbos, that talks about how Tanoim and Amoraim would sometimes do things lifnim Meshuas Adin. So they would be allowed to do certain things, but they went beyond. And the Gemara talks about it not as a chumrah which has no place, talks about as something which is meshubach, something which is praiseworthy. And many times we see that some businessmen don't want to rely on any heterim. And that's, I think, it's, some chumras they don't really have too much place in halacha, but this chumrah definitely has place. But nevertheless, it's also important to be able to talk about me'ikar adin. What is the halacha? Number one, sometimes situations don't allow for chumras. And also it's important to melamed schus, that people should know that if they're doing something, certain things, it doesn't constitute Chilul Shabbos. It's also important to know. So first of all, what could be the problems of conducting business? Let's start with websites. When a person has a particular website that sells, makes kinyonim, and there are three main problems that we are facing over here, three main questions. The first question is the general questions, Mekach Memker. Mekach Memker is a takones chazal, the chazal misaken, that we're not allowed. It's not the Raisa, but it's like any other takon of chazal, which we have to keep. And in order to avoid certain things like writing, they have instituted the takona that you can't conduct any business on Shabbos. It's a general takona, and it's in Halacha. It's spoken about in Rambam, Hilchah Shabbos Chav Gimel, Halacha Yud Beis, and in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Vov. And the Alter Rebbe talks about it in Shavov in Seif Dalet. So over here we're talking about that the sale occurs on Shabbos. So the Chura, that raises the question of Mekach Memker conducting business on Shabbos. The second question, which is related to it, is called Schar Shabbos. The Chazal also forbidden to receive payment for even permitted activity on Shabbos. So if, for example, a person wants to become a babysitter on Shabbos, I mean, there are permitted ways which we'll touch upon how we go about it, because we know that everybody gets babysitter on Shabbos, people get chazonim on Shabbos, people have Balei Koyer on Shabbos and so on and so forth. And obviously there are ways to go around it. But in a very, very black and white sort of way, one is forbidden to do a permitted activity on Shabbos and to receive a schar, to receive a reward for it. And this is another problem, that you are receiving schar Shabbos. And the third possible problem that could be part of it is Amir el-Nochri. We'll see later on that we sometimes, not not in a situation, we're going to talk later on about, Amazon and similar things and fulfillment centers. Over there's a question of Amir al-Nochri, of actually doing something for us on Shabbos. So those are the questions that are connected with having business on internet. So first of all, I want to say that let's discuss it, assuming that the customers are non-Jews, because the separate problem, the customers are Jews, and I'll discuss how do we know, because there's always a possibility the customers are Jews. We'll talk about it later. But let's assume right now we're talking about where the customers are non-Jews. And over here, the main Acharon, the main of the one of the Pois Kador, who lived about 150 years ago, approximately, more, 190 years ago. There was Rabbi Akiva Eger, who lived in the first part of the 19th century. And he wrote in the famous tshuva that everybody talks about. Actually, it's interesting that one of the questions I received today was, and I'll read what the person wrote, that Rabbi Akiva Eger introduces a novel concept pertaining to the prohibition of Mekach Memker. He proposes that it is not only the act of acquisition, in other words, even when you're not doing anything yourself, which is also, rather the actual effect of the kinyan is also as well. So in other words, what he's saying is like this. He's saying that even if you're doing something Erev Shabbos, before Shabbos, and this will go in force on Shabbos itself. So, and it's something passive, you do nothing about it. Rabbi Akiva Eger seems to say that it's osir. And there are many poskim who bring him to question some of the things that were very common. We'll talk about vending machines. That was today we are more sophisticated. The vending machine was a major shaila came up, and Moshe Feinstein, he says, and then he questions, he brings somewhat of a limud schus in Chilul Gimel Orach Chaim. He talks about it, but nevertheless, he says Kfar Hoyer Zokin, and he basically says we should be choishish what Rabbi Akiva Eger says. Now, all of the Achronim who argue with Rabbi Akiva Eger, they say that the chashash is valid only if the Jew knows that the transaction will take place on Shabbos. But if not, it's not osir. And one of the main, it was like every subject is certain, like a classical tshuva that everybody talks about. And the famous tshuva that talks about from a different perspective to Rabbi Akiva Eger, it's the tshuva of the Marshak. Marshak was Shimon Grunfeld, was one of the greatest poskim of Hungary, who lived in the second part of the 19th century. There's like literally from the three greatest poskim of that time. And the Marshak says that he actually talks about the concept of vending machines. And he says that on both grounds, it's mutter. Both because of Mekach Memker and because of Schar Shabbos. And he says as follows, he says that, but he gives a condition. He says that it can be on the property of a Jew. It has to be in a neutral place. That's one of the conditions. And by the way, I just want to give you something which will come up, and it's important to know some of the very fundamental questions. We know that when it comes to Amir al-Nochri, for example, so not only you are not allowed to have a schir yoim, to have somebody who gets paid per day or per hour, somebody to work for you on Shabbos, to do things for you on Shabbos. But you can have also a kablan. Kablan means somebody who's a contractor, somebody does for you a job. But that applies when the kablan works on the property of a Jew. So for example, you're not allowed to have a non-Jewish workers build a house for you on Shabbos. However, are you allowed to have somebody do something for you on Shabbos if it's done on their property? So that depends. What I'm saying now is very fundamental for what we're going to talk about later. So if, for example, you will bring a car to a mechanic, and you're going to bring a car to a mechanic on Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos, and you say, I'm going to pick it up onto Shabbos. So you're basically telling him, I'd like you to do it for me on Shabbos, and you're specifying that. And that's something which is awesome. But if you have a piece of furniture built for you in a non-Jewish factory, and this furniture is being built over 5-6 weeks, there's no question that there's no Isur Amir al-Nochri, because the person is a kabbalah, gets paid by job, and you're certainly not telling him to work on Shabbos. And the fact that he may be working on Shabbos, it's not your Geschäft, and therefore that's something which is permitted. So having something on the property of a Jew, it makes it much worse. But if, and again, the subject was of these vending machines, this machine you could put money in and get something. So first of all, he says that because it's passive, and he argues against Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and he says because the Jew is not specifying, is not having anything to do with the fact that it's done on Shabbos. It doesn't have to be done on Shabbos. It just may be done on Shabbos. Therefore, he says there's no shail of Mekel Chomemker. And also, he says something which is consistent both with the Alter Rebbe in Shilchov Gimel and also with Noide Behuda. He says there's no problem of Schar Shabbos because there's no service. You're not doing a service and you're not doing any like rentals. You're not renting anything else. He says because of that, it happens to be somebody comes in, that puts in the money, he gets something for it. That's not considered neither Mekel Chomemker nor Schar Shabbos. And I must say that the vast majority of Achronim, they side with the Marshag and not like Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And those include Sholem Eshev, who was a great Pesach and Broad. They include Das Teira, the Brezhanarov, who was one of the greatest Galiciana poskim of the 19th century, and also includes, I had it on my table over here, I was looking at it today, but I can't find it right now. It also includes Teiras Chesed of Lublinarov. His name was Shem Zalman of Lublin, who was a great chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he moved later on to Eretz Yisrael. He was known to be a Ga'ana Ga'onim. He wrote fundamental, very, very important shuvas, and he also writes about similar things, and he sides with the shitta of the Marshag rather than with Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And later on also we have Chelkas Yankiv, who was the brother-in-law of Minchas Yitzchok. His brother-in-law actually, he questioned it. Minchas Yitzchok, he wrote that in Chel Gimel, that since the kinyan takes place on Shabbos, it's also even there's no Maisa from a Jew. That's what. I found Teres Chesed over here. Teres Chesed in Siman Yud Gimel talks about it, and Minchas Yitzchok talks about in Siman in Chelik Gimel Siman Lamed Dalet. And he says that since kinyan takes place on Shabbos, it's also even though there's no Maisa from a Jew. And he gives two conditions which, we can question them. It's questioned, and we can also question from our logic. He says that, number one, he says that the Jew doesn't want to be koine the money until for Shabbos. That's fair enough. That's okay. The Jew definitely doesn't want it. He doesn't mind if money comes afterwards. But the second thing that he says, that you have to make it nigh that the kinyan took place already from Erev Shabbos. And this is difficult to understand because how can you make a condition that a non-Jew is koine before Shabbos? Even though he had no intention, he could come and koine afterwards. That's something which tzorich in Godel. But this is, we have a number of achronim like Minchas Yitzchok and like Shevet HaLevi who question the concept, but the vast Rubim Kekulim of Poskim, they agree with the shit of the Marshag and all the Poskim that were mentioned. And they also include the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He talks about, Shlomo Zalman is quick to mention that if it's likely, we look about Rov is very, it's a big problem. If it's likely that Jews will buy from that, then you should be more, that not Ikra Din, but it's proper to be more careful. But Chelkas Yankiv, Ber Moshe, the Bretzinerov, and all of them, they basically saying that they rule like the Marshag. There's no question of Mekel Chomemker, and there's no question of Schar Shabbos. So to Misakim, the bottom line is that the vast majority of poskim that would say that a Jewish website may remain open on Shabbos. And that is true even if the credit card of the buyer is automatically charged at the time of purchase of Shabbos and Yom Tov. Again, for those reasons that we're given. And but nevertheless, because we have poskim that are machmir, so it would be recommended whenever possible to adjust the automated system that the buyers, that the credit card which belongs to the buyer and is charged and processed after Shabbos. If it's possible to do that, that's definitely is a good thing. And with most websites that I know, and I want to tell you that I'm sure many of you who do business on internet know more about some of the nuances more than I know. I think it's very, I try, because I get the shilas, I try to make myself aware of all of the nuances of how these things are conducted. But that's why I'm making a disclaimer that there could be a lot of other points that have to be addressed. So again, I'm giving you a general concept, but it seems that most websites, they work in such a way that the customer is not charged until it's verified that the item is ready to ship. So it's sometimes possible to adjust. But again, I want to say two things. Number one, the Gemara says that in these things, if somebody can be machmir tova olav bracha, it's not something which is pointless. It's definitely something which is, we know the Alter Rebbe talks about shutfus on Shabbos. And he says himself that whenever possible, shutfus is a necessary, sometimes a necessary mechanism that is done with certain businesses that it's impossible to close on Shabbos, like he gives, tolls and these sort of things. But the Alter Rebbe would say that ideally we should avoid having business open on Shabbos. But again, because the Torah does give us, the Halacha does give us the ability to do it, it's definitely cannot be said that a person is chas v'sholom mechal Shabbos. We know that there's some famous Jewish businesses like B&H, I think it's called, that does close on Shabbos, and they're very famous for that. And it's something which definitely is a good thing. But we are here to talk about also Ikar Adin, and the Ikar Adin is something which is, according to the vast majority of poskim, is permitted under this circumstance which I mentioned. The second question which was mentioned is the question of fulfillment center. And basically, I'll talk about Amazon separately because Amazon is known to have certain nuances and certain types of contractual obligations which others don't have. But let's first talk about fulfillment center generally. So what they do is they store, they receive orders, they package, they ship to the consumers, they do all of these things. So what are the questions? First of all, Amir Akum, because we know that they're doing work for you at the time. And over here, the shaila would be, are you kaveh malachtei b'Shabbos, which is mentioned in Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch itself, in Reish Mem Zayin, in Reish Nun Beis. When you are actually specifying that you want to work on Shabbos, that's osir. But the question is that that's not the case over here. It looks like it because you're hiring to process orders which happen on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So the question is mekach umemker, because the websites, they're configured to automatically charge your credit cards and the fulfillment center orders and processes the order on Shabbos. So over here, there's no, number one, there's no Amir Akum. Why? Because the fulfillment center is not told explicitly that you are required to carry the orders on Shabbos. And according to the Alter Rebbe, in Reish Mem Dalet, I believe, he says that you're not kover melachta b'Shabbos. You only kover melachta if you specify that the work will be done on Shabbos. So I'll give you an example of, when you can't take a car to a mechanic on Erev Shabbos because you basically kover to him Zman Melachta, saying, I want the work to be done on Shabbos. And there's no, again, I'm talking about most poskim. There are some poskim over here that I know poskim who are machmir. I know Rabbonim are machmir. I had a discussion with a close colleague of mine who definitely with Amazon is very, very strict. I'll give you my reasons why I think Ikar Adin, it is mutter, except when the storehouse is the Yid storehouse. If the Amazon using their own storehouse, I believe that it's Ikar Adin, it's mutter. But it's definitely also true that the Arabonim who are machmir poskim, but from the actual letter of the halacha, it seems there's no Amir al-Nochri, there is no Mekach Umemker, because Mekach Umemker, as we mentioned before with the whole Marshag and the whole polemic over there, it's only when intentionally something is scheduled to be, and the mice is scheduled to be done on Shabbos, or when there's some kind of involvement from a Jewish person. But if something's totally passive and there's neither action nor intent, that doesn't constitute a shaila of Mekach Memka. However, we have to know that one should only use the services of such a fulfillment center if it doesn't require to process immediately and or doesn't offer an option that for, if there's an option, which we'll talk about Amazon soon, it is an option that for added fee, you have to expedite the shipping. That already becomes a question. And therefore, you shouldn't guarantee on a website that all orders will go out within X amount of days. Now, Amazon itself has that problem because it has part of the contract that people can pay an expedite. So with Amazon, there are reasons to be makel. First of all,
Rabbi Allman, if I could just add, I just heard this, that Amazon is making a push to try to get their whole entire system to be a one-day delivery. This is a new push that they're doing. I don't know how long it'll take till they go through, but I'm just throwing that in. I don't know if that adds anything to the conversation.
Okay, it's even today there is an option to do that. You know, maybe 2 days. I'm not sure. I have to find out from Avinim. But the reason to a makel is that the Jewish seller doesn't determine whatsoever what happens, and therefore he's not kover melachte b'Shabbos. It's different when we'll talk about in a minute. So if the storehouse is, you know, there are two ways you can work these fulfillment centers. One way is that they do everything for you. They store everything. They store. They package. They deliver. That's one way. And the other way is that it's done in the property of a Jew. And I really think that is a problem. I'm aware that there's some, even, you know, very ehrlich Geleit who do that, and I'm sure I would malamed schools that they have a heter from Mirov, but I would imagine that the heter will be with something else. It's not as simple as it seems, because maybe there's shutfus with somebody else, because there is definitely a major problem. You know, how's it different than having your business open on Shabbos? If you're having your own storehouse and everything is packaged over there and everything is, all the work is done over there, then there's no difference than having, you know, one's own business open on Shabbos. So that to me is a major problem. And another problem is, with all of the things I mentioned before, is when there is a certain probability that Yidden will be nichshel through our websites and through our business, which is open on Shabbos. How is it? How do we determine? So the Chazal talk from the perspective of Roiv, majority. And this is an example in many places in Shas. We bring that you don't have to be 100% certain, but you have to know that the Roiv of the customers are Goyim, are not Jews. And the fact that the problem of Roiv being Jews is the issue of Lifnei Iver, which means that you're putting a stumbling block. You know, the person may not be frum, but you are causing him to be over on Isurei Shabbos. And that goes by the Rebbe. And therefore, the problem would be if somebody has a business which is primarily directed to Yidden. So, for example, if one has a Judaica or some kind of a Jewish business, or in Eretz Yisrael, where he knows that Amazon, most of the customers will be Jewish people. Over there will be a major problem. But if we have a situation where it could be anybody, then it goes by Roiv in the customer pool of the website, not in the place we live, because the internet is not geographical. It's basically, you know, all over the place. But it's basic goes by the majority of the customers. So I think I mean, there's a lot of questions which I couldn't touch upon because I only have 25 minutes. But I want to reiterate that if somebody has the ability to be able to close such businesses or to work with Amazon in the way that how to be able to, it's also important to be able to let the customers know what's happening. If somebody that doesn't respond to things on Shabbos, it's important to let, first of all, because of Marisayin, everybody can see that this business doesn't operate on Shabbos, and because you also placate your customers if there's nobody responding to them. But ultimately, whatever one can do in order to be able to close websites or work with a system to avoid working on Shabbos, Tov Olav Bracha. Everything I said now is to Melamed Schus, that those that are operating within these parameters are not Mechal Shabbos, according to most opinions, even though that some would argue.
So Rabbi Omi, maybe I could just ask you, I mean, first of all, that was a fantastic presentation. And my mind is still spinning from the amount of Mara Mekaymis that you quoted. But maybe you could, just with the 3 minutes remaining, if you could just like in a Masakim, summarize just the basic points, just as takeaways for people that are listening, and then we'll move to the Q&A. I see some people posted questions to ask you.
The main points are that both in the question of websites and the question of fulfillment centers, there's also a question of auctions of PayPal, which I haven't touched upon, but in these particular two shilas, CHYE in the realm of Mega Chomemker, Schar Shabbos, and Amir al-Nochri, there is no issue according to vast majority of poskim me'ikar adin. For all those reasons, Kaveh Malachta B'Shabbos, it's not something that you are actively pursuing. It's something that you want to be done. Everything is done outside of your realm, of your rotzen. In other words, it's something that sometimes you do have to specify that you're not insisting. The Alter Rebbe says you don't have to actually go beyond that. But as long as you tell people that there's no necessity to do something on Shabbos, in Reishmim, I think it's Reishmim Dalad, the Alter Rebbe says that is already will constitute. There's no shaila of Amir al-Nochri. So those are the 3 points that are relevant to both subjects. And most poskim would say that Me'ikar Adin, you are not over on Isser Shabbos, but at the same time, if you're able to avoid it, Tova Olecha Bracha.
Okay, so Shukayach, that was a fantastic presentation. I'm sorry we have had such a small slot of time. So what I want to ask is all of the Rabbanim that are on, please, guys, unmute yourself here. We have some questions that are already on the Q&A, which I'm going to start to pose. And for those of you watching that want to post more questions, whether it's on the topic we just discussed right now, which is the websites and Shabbos, and whether it's on Heter Iska or whether it's on partnerships. So I'm gonna randomly ask different questions. We'll start with the question that just came right now with regard to, oh boy, it's a long shilas here. Oh boy. Okay, 1 second. So we'll start with a question for Rabbi Shuchat. Someone asked it for Heter Iska. And then someone asked a very long question over here. I'll have to read through it first. Okay, so the question was as follows. Is a Heter Iska required for a lease arrangement? And he gives an example. Someone leases computers to me rather than I'm buying them. So the lease arrangement typically are calculated with interest rates. So do they have to basically make a Heter Iska on such an arrangement, Rabbi Shucha?
Okay, so we're going to go to an example. If somebody leases anything, an apartment, a car, a computer, whatever it is, and he has a certain amount that has to be paid per month, whether it is whatever the rent lease price is per month, per day, per week. If there is additional amounts that are paid for being late, then there are specifically for being late, then yes, that is considered ribis, and you need a Heter Iska with them. However, if the only way that this is paid is with this matter, that means it's not really an interest rate, it's rather that each day you pay a certain amount, the percentage of the computer, then it's not a problem. But if there is a set amount for the payment and you get penalties of interest for keeping it later, then you have to make a Heter Iska.
Okay. Looks like a lot of the questions that came in are all associated with Heter Iska. If any of you have any more questions, send them over here. So another question for Rabbi Shuchat. What happens with a partnership that is open-ended? You're buying a property to hold indefinitely. Do you have to restart an investment every few years or every phase of the project?
So the question is not very clear. It means if you buy a property to hold indefinitely and you are having somebody who's partners with you for that investment, then a regular business deal does not need a heter iska. A heter iska is only when there is principal and then there is profits that are being made. So if profits are a set amount that looks like ribis, then you make a heter iska. But if two people go into a partnership, one person invests money, and the point is to hold the property for long term or forever, and each month the person will get a certain amount of the profits. It doesn't need a heter iska because that's a iska. There's no need for a heter iska. Iska is a business where you split the profits. The only time a heter iska is needed is when there's a set amount, regardless of actual profits and losses.
Okay, Rabbi Ullman, here's a question that came up for you. Basically, I just have to sort of phrase the question correctly as it was written. If someone opens a website or they open an Amazon business, notwithstanding the fact that they don't intend for anyone to buy on Shabbos, at the end of the day, they're enjoying commerce as a result of Shabbos, basically. In other words, if you had a physical store, you'd close your doors on Shabbos and you'd never make a penny on Shabbos. Now that you have an Amazon store, now that you have a website, even though you don't intend for anyone to buy from you, at the end of the day, you're basically making money because of Shabbos. So does that factor in as an issue at all into the discussion that you brought up?
Right. So again, we can differentiate between Me'ikar Adin and somebody wants to go Lifnim Mishurus Adin. Me'ikar Adin, it is my belief. I know that it's not shared by everybody, but it's my belief that that's the shit of the Marshag, which was followed by the majority of the poskim to do with those vending machines, which was looks like it was quite an invention of those days. It became like quite a, he answers all of the chashoshis, including schar Shabbos, enjoying money which came on Shabbos. And he gives the parameters why, and this seems to be consistent also, in my opinion, with the Alter Rebbe. Because the Alter Rebbe says in Shinchov Gimel that ultimately Schar Shabbos can only be for either a service done on Shabbos or for rental. That's considered Schar Shabbos. If somebody walked in and took something from you and they put money on a table, that doesn't constitute, is done without your sort of involvement, without you asking for it, and so on and so forth. They walked into a place where you have your goods, and they did it. That doesn't constitute Schar Shabbos. Schar Shabbos is a very interesting question, which is no time to go over here. But what constitutes, even when people we do something permitted on Shabbos, a service, we cannot get money for it, and unless under certain circumstances, it's done what's called by havloah. Havloah means that something is also could be, you could be tailor on Erev Shabbos. You do something outside of Shabbos also and give everything. And that in itself has certain limitations, which it's not a time and a place to go into right now, but it's something which is important to know. So if somebody has those Shabbos, you have to be able to address it to a Rov. But when it comes to these questions of Shabbos, I can understand why a person can say, I don't want to have anything to do with anything that happened on Shabbos. It's my, it's a ruchnisdike thing, and it's something which even if a minority of opinions hold like that, I don't want to do it. And that's something which I think is very praiseworthy. But Me'ikar Adin, it seems that the majority of poskim that would follow the Marshag, the Siyaito, with the Imei, and all of those who follow the Marshag, that it's not considered to be a problem of Schar Shabbos in such a case. If it's outside of the property, again, it has to be, and websites, certainly it's not in your physical domain.
Okay, I got it. So there's somebody here that wrote a very multi-part Shiloh, Mr. Miller. If you're still on right now, Mr. Miller, can I, where is, hold on one second, unmute you. I'm gonna allow you to talk. And this way if you could just ask your question very succinctly, because it's a very long question and I don't think we have time to get into details, but if you could, I'm gonna give you the ability to speak right now. If you could please just go ahead and post your question verbally. Can you, yes, are you here, Mr. Miller? I think I gave you the ability to speak right now. Are you? But yes, David Miller, are you on? If you press unmute on your microphone, unmute. I'm trying to unmute you here. Are you there, Mr. Miller? Okay, I don't know. I'm trying to give him the ability. He wrote a very long question here. Okay, while he's, if you're there, you could unmute yourself. But while you're doing that, so a fresh Shiloh that came in right now. This one is for you again, Rabbi Ullman. Does the time zone of the buyer or seller or both matter if the transaction is done and it's Shabbos for one of them?
Again, in a situation where all of the conditions that I mentioned before apply, it will make a difference, because even if it's the same zone for both of them and Shabbos applies to both of them, if that is, there is a tzad, very strong tzad, lahokel ulahatir, to be lenient and to allow. How much more so if, for example, the seller isn't in a time zone where it's not Shabbos, because everything goes according to the person himself. So, for example, I'm permitted to call in Australia or Motzei Shabbos to America if I'm speaking to a non-Jew and to ask him to do something for me, because for me it's Australia. So the fact that I can ask him to do any favor for me on Shabbos, because right now it's after Shabbos by me, and therefore no restrictions apply, and therefore there's no restriction of Amir al-Nochri. The fact that it's a Shabbos, but where the Nochri is, it doesn't matter, because the restriction is not on him, the restriction is on me. Amir al-Nochri, understand? So I'm allowed to call as long as I know that it's not Jewish. And over here also, you could rely on the fact that there's a roiv of non-Jews. If I want to call a particular service in America and say, please do this or this for me, I'm allowed to do it. There's not even a shaila. So how much more so if the time zone of the balabos of the business is when it's not Shabbos, then bichlal there's no shaila. The chidush is even when it's Shabbos by him.
Okay, understood. Thank you. All right, so this is back to Heter Iska. This one person wrote a very long Shiloh over here, and I'm just going to pose one of his questions to you, Rabbi Shuchat. He said that, I mean, I guess there are certain Jewish banks that are owned by Jews, and they actually have like some sort of blank Heter Iska that allows the whole bank to operate, under the standard practices of banks. So for somebody who's, especially in light of all the details that you just described, or appropriate Heter Iska. So if somebody, is it appropriate? I don't know if this is something that could be, I don't know if it's a problem to talk about this publicly. But in other words, is there an issue to go to some of these known banks that operate under Heter Iska and to use their services, or is it better to stay away from those types of things?
They usually have something called a Heter Iska Klali, which is a general Heter Iska, which most of the time is not in line with the Alter Rebbe. So as much as you want to support Jews, would be probably a better idea to find real goyim to borrow money from. Now that we made peace with the Arabs, I'm sure there's money over there to lend to you.
Okay. Rabbi, no, sorry, this is actually, no, back for another Shaila for you, Rabbi Shuchat. I see Heter Iska is a real, people were very into this topic. You wrote, since you cannot mention the return percentage, do you restate the Heter each time more capital is raised?
So every time, let's say I'm going to answer two parts to that question. There is if let's say after, I didn't mention before, if after 2 years the time is up and the people want to extend the Heter Iska, then yes, you redo the Heter Iska for longer and you just keep on going, and all you have to do is modify the amount of profit that has to be paid at the end. If there's more money coming in, then when you modify it accordingly. You put in the amount of money that was received. If $100,000 was received and it wasn't paid back yet, and the profits on it were already paid, and now you're taking another $100,000, a new profit. So then you pay. You're right that this $200,000 were received, and this is the amount of profit that has to be paid by this and this date.
Okay, Rabbi Werner, Charlotte came in with regard to partnerships. I don't know if this person was on maybe at the when you spoke, because I thought I might have heard you discuss this. But basically, this person is asking, they're in their partnership right now, and they are concerned that the partnership is going to dissolve, and they're basically asking, instead of having to go to a full-on to a Beis Din and to a Rav to try to resolve this issue, is there any particular halachic advice for how to go about trying to strengthen the partnership before it falls apart?
Well, I think that is something, going to a Beis Din is usually for when you want to, usually you don't go to Beis Din to try to work things out. Beis Din, usually you go to fight it out. I would say that if a person is in his business and sees that the partnership is losing traction, or possibly he sees it's moving in the direction of collapsing. I think, as I gave advice, when you put together a partnership, it's extremely important. It's be very wise to find someone you can go to who understands business, who's a Rav Meir, who has a good understanding in business. A lot of times, these issues are not necessarily are communicative. It's a problem in communication. And a lot of times it could be a little bit more than communication, but it's not necessarily always difficult to resolve. It becomes difficult to resolve when it turns into when it breaks down into a real, when it starts turning nasty or angry. But if you're in a business and you see that there's some, it's moving not in a good direction, the wise thing would be to sit down with someone who you both can sit down with, who you both trust, who you both who's known to be someone who has a good understanding, and discuss it. And very often they'll be able to put it back on track. And sometimes they'll be able to also put some things in to give you some advice how to strengthen the partnership so you shouldn't end up with these kinds of challenges.
Okay, great. This is the final trial. This is for you, Rabbi Ullman, and we're going to leave it at this. This is a very particular shiloh, very narrow shiloh. eBay, right? One of the platforms that where people sell on. So there's these auctions. One of the ways that you could purchase items is through auctions. This is not actually a seller question. This is a buyer question. Can somebody, if there's an auction that's set to end on Shabbos, and with eBay you can pre-bid in advance. So you could put, are you ready to on Thursday you put in, I'm ready to bid a maximum of $500, and then the listing will end on Shabbos, and you don't know what someone else is going to bid up against you. And basically, eBay will bid for you, and you end up winning on Shabbos. So that's again, you're not a seller now; you're a buyer. Is that an issue?
Yeah. So you talk about a buyer.
Yes.
I would say that it is permitted, and the reason why I would say it's permitted is because the main reason that the conclusion of an online auction doesn't actually doesn't finish the transaction. What happens is that it shows a commitment between the seller and the highest bidder. So Shabbos wasn't the designated time of the actual transaction. I would say that it's not osur.
Interesting. If you don't mind, I'm actually trying to follow that. But in other words, because you're not committed to pay until afterwards, and you could back out under certain circumstances. You're saying that's not considered consummating the agreement on Shabbos.
Even if, for example, they're going to hold you to it, but commitment itself, it doesn't yet constitute the actual final transaction.
So you're saying that it's okay lechatchila, or
I'm saying even Mokum Tzorech again that a person can say, listen, if you can avoid it, I would definitely like to avoid it if I can. But let's say, for example, you have a situation where you will suffer a terrible hezek if you don't do it.
So are you drawing a distinction then? You're saying, in other words, if it's a luxury item that somebody, mehechetesi versus
once ikaradin, I'm saying that a person lechatchila is a little bit of a loose word, because lechatchila could mean that yes, you can do lechatchila, but at the same time there is room for to be machmir. But what I'm saying is that Kol Zman, that Shabbos wasn't the designated time of the actual transaction, you didn't violate the Issur of Mekach Memker. That's what I believe. Again, I would like to everything that I'm saying here, and it's a Tnai Kodem L'Maaseh, that if somebody has, I don't want whatever I'm saying here to be used for actual. When it comes to specific situations, a shaila should be asked again, because there could be certain nuances which may be different. But from the way that these auctions work, from the way I understand, they work that the end of the auction is the commitment, not the actual transaction.
Understood. Okay, great. This was really wonderful. Each one of you, I want to thank you. Each presented so beautifully, and really such wonderful teichen here. And you know, Rabbi Omen, you gave such tremendous background to the whole entire picture, and Rabbi Shochat, Rabbi Werner, Shekayach, to each of you for your time and for sharing with the Olam. And want to wish everyone.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you very much. I really hope, again, with your permission, I would like to. I know this has been recorded. I would like to make it available. There were many people that messaged me that the timing didn't work for them and they want to watch it. You know, these are very important conversations that unfortunately aren't discussed enough and really should be available for people to be aware of and you know, to be cautious about. So you know, it is my intention to make sure this is available for people, and I'd love to keep the conversation going. So again, for those of you that have been watching, you know, I want to thank you all for coming. You know, we're here in the community year-round to try to be here a resource for you in your parnasa, with your business or with your jobs. And you know, we'd love to make business halacha something that's you know, on top of people's minds, and so that we masayu matane ve'amuna, we should do everything in the way that makes Hashem proud of us. And want to wish every single one of you a Gemar Chasim Teva, a good bench to Yar. Have an easy fast, and as we're saying this year's Tehesh Nas Plois Arenu, we should see Taka the Neflois. With the Geula Shlema and everyone, a wonderful, good bench to Yar. Thank you so much. Thank you.